Firstly, thank you very much, Sarah, for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
That's okay.
So I've gone through your profile. I can see you're working in Microsoft. You worked in Australia. You're working in United States. So I thought to tell about your work to my audience.
Yeah, well, currently my job, I'm pretty lucky. I've worked in a couple of different countries. So I've been working for Microsoft for the past 4.5 years. I am currently a senior cloud security advocate. So advocacy is, well, a lot of people know it as DevRel, but I don't really, well, I do talk to devs, but I talk to lots of other people as well, which is why we call it advocacy. And then before that, I lived in the US for a little bit. I worked for the Microsoft Sentinel product group. So I used to help deploy very complicated customers. And I also gave feedback to the rest of the product team about what was working and what wasn't. And then my first job at Microsoft, we're going back in time. My first job at Microsoft was as Azure security architect, and I was the first one in this part of the world because I was back in Australia then. So yeah, I've been in security for about 9, 10 years now. Before it was cool, and then before that, I was an infrastructure engineer. So yeah, I've moved around a little bit. I've lived in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, the US, but now I'm back in Australia, and I'm going to try and not move again because too much moving.
So working in security for a long time, how is it? How is this experience?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, security is very busy. It changes all the time. There's always like new things going on. So, you never have 2 days that are the same. Now we're all talking, well, everybody's talking about AI and data security, are big kind of hot topics at the moment. No one was talking about those things 6 months ago. So, things change very quickly. So it's always new. But it also means you have to keep learning as well. So it's kind of, if you like to do the same thing again and again and again, security is probably not the right place to be. But if you like stuff changing, it's a good place to be. And of course, there is a global shortage generally. No matter where you are in the world, there's a global shortage of security professionals. So we're always going to have jobs if we do security, because we don't have enough people.
So in this evolution of technology, what you understood about security?
Well, security. Well, it's a big word, right? People, and I should probably. I mean, there's so many things. Security encompasses so many different things. I mean, and it's a huge industry. Like lots of the time people will say to me, "Oh, Sarah, I really want to work in security." And I'm like, well, which bit? There's loads of it. I mean, you have like application security, you have infrastructure security, you have GRC, or governance, risk and compliance, which is less technical, but still really important. You have penetration testers, the people who try and hack systems, which is what a lot of people think of when we speak about security. But that's only like a tiny proportion of all the people out there who do security, really. And it's very cool. And that's what you see on the TV. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and do that if you're interested in it, but there are a lot of other jobs out there as well. And so, I mean, so security is just a really big thing, and there's so many bits to it. I mean, at the moment, more recently, I've been looking at data security. I think that's really interesting. And also how we actually talk about security to anybody who doesn't work in security, because people who work in security are really good at talking to other people in security about it. But actually, security is a strange bit of IT where it actually affects everybody. So people in other parts of IT, but also the bigger, wider world, need to care about IT security as well. Now, to a greater or lesser extent, of course, and different people need to do different things, but we're really bad at talking about it.
So there must be a strong reason and driving force for you to wake up in the morning every day and work in security. What is that?
I guess, well, the work is never done. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can never ever secure something 100%, right? It's not possible. There is always a tiny little risk, no matter how good your security is, how good your people are, how good your technology is. There's always a risk, and we can never ever 100% guarantee something will not get breached or hacked. It's not possible, and because of that, we just have to keep going and going and going. It's iterative. I think people are getting generally better at this, but they used to think that security was a one-time thing. You go in, I'll secure all my systems, we're done. That's not how it works, right? Because all the time we find new ways to defend against things, and then attackers find new ways to get around them, and then we have to find new ways to defend against the new things, and it's a cat and mouse game, and it will be forever, I think. So yeah, the job is never done. It's just an ongoing thing, which I think is it's also interesting as well. But yeah, I wish we could just beat all the hackers and be done, but we can't, unfortunately.
You worked in different parts of the world in security. So have you found or is there any difference in working in security in different places?
Yes and no. I think generally, because I have worked, security and technology generally doesn't change. The actual technology doesn't change between different country to different country. Still all trying to do the same things. What does change is sometimes people's culture towards security and people's attitudes. So I'll give you an interesting example. When I lived in New Zealand, it's a very small country. There's only 5 million people there. People are very trusting. It's a lovely place. But when you do phishing exercises, so when companies send around a fake email pretending to be a phishing email, and then they measure how many employees click on the link because they're trying to raise security awareness. They say that the average click-through rate for a fake phishing email in a company generally sits, they say, around 10-11%. But in New Zealand, because New Zealanders are trusting, it's often more like 20-25%. And again, that's a cultural thing because New Zealanders are quite trusting people, and they live in a very trusting society where, people don't think that they're being scammed. And so if you get something that says, hey, your parcel hasn't been delivered, click here, they're like, okay, cool. And so yeah, I think it's things like that are probably what changes, like the culture around security and how you make people think about it. But generally technology stays the same, and that's why I have been able to move from country to country, because the technology I'm using is always the same. So it means the skills are very transferable.
The number of users for Microsoft products and services around the world have increased in last 10 years. So how security played a major role in this?
Oh, wow. Security, I mean, obviously Microsoft employs thousands and thousands of people to do security. It's a big bit of the business, and we have multiple different platforms that need securing. We have Azure, we have Office 365, we have Xbox, we have Bing, and everything. All of those things need to be secured. So there are a lot of security teams in Microsoft. We also have research teams on top of that, whose job it is just to do research about security threats and the different threat actor groups out there. So it's a really big thing in what Microsoft does. I think in the last sort of 5-6 years, people have realized that Microsoft kind of has gone all in on security and is like really, really, investing in it and trying to build out the products, because prior to that, there was less of a focus. Though, in fairness, I do sometimes talk to people who say, Microsoft, you don't do security. Do you remember Word 1997? And that wasn't very secure. And you're like, that was like over 20 years ago. Whereas in the early 2000s, I mean, this was when Bill Gates was still in Microsoft. They started a whole initiative, and I forget its name now. I think it's called like Trusting Compute Initiative. It was called something like that. And that was Microsoft's big push to start doing secure development. And that has evolved into, what we see now. Some Microsoft people were some of the, at least some of them were contributors to the first ever SDLC, the Secure Development Lifecycle. One of my colleagues, who's been in Microsoft for like 30 years, he's very cool. He is one of the first contributors to that. So we definitely do, it's definitely been a journey from probably not very much 20 plus years ago to where we are now, but certainly security is at the forefront of people's minds, as it should be, because of course, if people won't want to use your things and your products if they don't think it's secure. So, it's the right thing to do, but also commercially, it is the right thing to do as well, because if you have a reputation for not building secure things, it doesn't look very good, right?
So what kind of mindset that you have that is making you to adapt to the change, the constant change that is happening?
Couple of things. Number one, always be curious, always keep learning, keep up to date with what's going on in the world, because, take last December, the one before, December 2021, that was when we saw Log4j, and that just exploded out of nowhere in a couple of days. And, Log4j was a big problem for pretty much anybody who was running Java. That was a massive headache for a lot of people, but that came out of nowhere. Like 2 days before, there was no one had ever heard of Log4j. And then suddenly it was this massive thing that was a very severe vulnerability and actually very easy to exploit. And everyone was running around like crazy trying to find what machines they had that were running this vulnerable piece of software. And, so I think there's always kind of, it's the learning thing, the keeping on top of things, but also on the other side of that, it's also accepting. And I would say this is good for anybody in any IT field nowadays, to accept that you don't know everything and you can't know everything. Because I often talk to people who will say, hey, Sarah, like, I just don't know this and I don't know this. And when I started in IT like 15 years ago, we didn't have the change of, things didn't change as quickly. Like every 2 or 3 years, you would get your on-prem software, whatever it was, and you would update it every 2 or 3 years, from like version 9 to version 10. And then there would be changes and you might have to learn the new changes. Whereas now with cloud and the rate of change of services, it's actually impossible to know everything like it used to be back in the day. And I still think many people haven't accepted that you can't learn everything. So what I would say is you need to be comfortable with the fact you don't know everything, because in today's IT environment, and like I said, it goes wider than just security. This is an IT thing as well. You're never going to know everything because stuff changes so quickly. I work for Microsoft. Even when I worked for a specific product in Microsoft, which I spent every day with, I knew a lot more than your average person would, of course, that was my job. But even sometimes I was like, oh, that feature, have we released that yet? Oh yeah, we have. Like, cause just stuff goes so quickly. And so I think you need to definitely, push yourself to learn as much as you can within reason, but also be comfortable with the fact you'll never know everything, because nobody does.
So you have seen the change that is happening in security from long time. So what is happening in the technology world?
Oh, well, I guess we'll address the elephant in the room. AI, right? Now, I think from a security person's perspective, there is a lot of potential in AI. There's a lot of opportunities, but also being a security person, we also have to balance that with, we need to understand how these things work and what they do with the information they're handling. So I think in a positive light, AI has a great potential to plug some of the skills gaps we have in security, because we don't have enough people and most companies around the world are struggling to get enough skilled people. AI can definitely help with plugging some of those gaps and getting rid of some of those time-consuming, repetitive jobs that people don't like doing anyway, which frees them up to do the stuff that needs real people. There is no way that AI is replacing people in security that I can see anytime soon, because I know that can sometimes be a concern of people. But then on the negative side, or the kind of thing we need to be cautious about, is that AI models, we don't know with a lot of them. We don't know what they're doing with data you put into them. We don't know where they store it. We don't know if everybody who queries the same model, is it sharing information you put in? If one customer puts in some information and asks it a question, and then another customer asks it something, will it also use that data that the other person put in, and we start getting like really messy data? Also, people could potentially, we know that sometimes, like say ChatGPT, it makes really, really nice lies. It sounds good, but it's completely lying on its answer. What if people start feeding the models purposely the wrong information, so it gives the wrong information out to people? That's a potential attack vector as well. So, and there are probably a lot of attack vectors on AI that I haven't even thought of yet, that we don't even know about yet. So, I think that's probably the thing that everybody generally in tech and the wider world is talking about AI. And so from a security perspective, I think there's a lot of potential, but we just need to be careful about what we do with them until we understand them a little bit better. And I'm sure, sadly, like I said, we will see some interesting abuses and attacks against AI models in due course, for sure.
So by understanding the real world problems like human created technology and virtual world where they are human can able to solve problems, it can be cloud or it can be anything inside the device. So what do you understood comparing the real world security and the virtual world security?
Nowadays we really talk about, we spend a lot of time just talking about sort of modern security. But I'll take it back. Sometimes we get caught up in we talk a lot about good shiny products. So we talk a lot about, my new firewall, my new endpoint protection, blah, 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 blah. But what we still forget to do time and time and time again is what we call sort of basic security hygiene. So security hygiene is not exciting, but it's common sense things like patching things in a timely manner, having MFA, multi-factor authentication, turned on, don't have any kind of storage account open to the internet, things like that have kind of been the same forever. There's a few additional ones because of cloud now, but these are good security practices we've had for a long time. Don't give someone admin privileges if they don't need them. People should only have admin privileges if they need them, because of course the more accounts that have admin privileges, the bigger the potential attack surface. And we still don't do that stuff properly. There is research that shows Microsoft does it, and so do other companies. There's something like 90% of breaches, the initial breach, would have been prevented by good security hygiene practices, which is just incredible. That blows my mind. It's because people so often think, and I think this is a big misconception, is that a computer hacker, some really evil hacker, will be sat there doing some really, really complicated hacking, and that's how they break into systems. And sometimes they do. But if you're a hacker and it's going to take you 3 days to hack somebody making a brand new exploit, or it's going to take you half an hour because the same company hasn't put in some patches that fix something that's exploitable, they're going to go for the easy route. There's no reason for them to use the really difficult one. And people forget this. And it's incredible. I can't stress enough that we talk about all these really, really cool tools, and they're great, and you probably should have them. But all the tools in the world can't save you if you use your same username and password in loads of places, or if you haven't patched a critical vulnerability in your OS. Like, we do forget these security basics, and it is shocking how often these basic good practices that have not changed at least at a high level, perhaps the principles at a high level have not changed for years. How we implement them, of course, depending on if it's cloud or on-premise, that changed a little bit, obviously, because as the technology has evolved, but the principles are the same, and we still don't do it well, and that is what the majority of attackers will exploit, not something really complicated. So that's probably, it's just interesting because security, although maybe the exploits change and the tactics change a bit, the mistakes people make are actually similar time and time and time again. So yeah, we have a ways to go, I think.
You are the person who experienced the diversity in humanity, being in different places and talking with different country people. So, how security in different places? You already answered how security in different places. I mean, the businesses in different countries. What are their requirements? Business owners, what they are asking about security when it comes to for their business.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it changes that much from country to country, to be honest with you. I mean, there are individual differences depending on your business owners, but I would say most business owners would like to not worry about security. And we're getting better. I'd say generally we're getting better at this. At the end of the day, and this is something that security people are bad at too. Security is a function of an organization. It is a function. It is not the be all and end all. An organization, if it's commercial, it's there to make money. If it's not for profit, it will have some other thing it's trying to do. And security is just a function of that organization. And so if security doesn't help the organization ultimately get to its end goal, then security is failing. And so what we've been bad at previously is just going, no, you can't do that, it's not secure, but not presenting any other way to do it or not helping. And so then people go around you. I think business owners, sometimes business owners have had a bad experience with security and they're like, oh, they're just the ones that say no. Oh, they're useless. Like, they're not any use to me because all they do is say no to everything I'm trying to do. Now, I think we're getting better at that, but I think, there is still a ways to go. And, but ultimately, no matter where you are in the world, security is only ever a function of an organization. And sometimes, and this is what business owners do, and sometimes they need to make a decision that might not be the best for security. As in, say you are launching a website and you find a really critical vulnerability in that website just before it goes live. And then the choice is you either don't go live and delay it by a week to fix the vulnerability. Say that's going to cost you $10 million. But fixing the vulnerability will, it'll cost you $10 million if you don't go live. And fixing it's going to cost about $1 million, but you will have to delay. And anyway, basically, sometimes they will say, hey, do you know what? I get that we have this vulnerability, but we're going to have to go live anyway. And then we look at the risk and the likelihood. So we'll say, hey, this is a high risk, but it's not actually that likely. And security generally shouldn't make the decision on behalf of the business. That's a business owner's call to say, I would rather go live with this vulnerability and fix it later on rather than lose the business $10 million or whatever it is. And so security is always a balancing act. And I think security people forget that as well, because they'll just be like, no, you must fix it because that's what we're like. And so I think something that security people are getting better at slowly, we've got a ways to go, is actually explain. All we have to do as security is explain to the business owner, this is what the problem is. This is potentially what could happen. This is how likely it is to actually happen. you make the decision what you want to do. We don't have to make the call for the business. That's someone much higher up the food chain who probably gets paid more money to take responsibility for those things. But sometimes we try and take the world on our shoulder and try and fix everything. But yeah, I wouldn't say it changes that much throughout the world. Not everyone's just wanting to get to whatever it is they want to do. Of course, there are individuals who are a bit different, but I wouldn't say there's massive differences from country to country that I've seen on that front.
So this 15 years of observation, how things works in technology, have you found a unique way, or have you got any thoughts that definitely will change or will affect or will impact or will create this positive environment where you as a security advocates don't need any work and people have their self understanding about not to do anything negative?
Um, Good question. It's a difficult one. I think, well, security advocacy is a pretty new thing, to be honest with you, but I think the principle of having people who whose job it is to communicate security things, more technical security things, I think is a really good idea, which is why I joined the team I'm in now, because it's great to go and talk to people. And actually, I like to talk to people not in security. So I go and talk to developers, I go talk to other parts of IT, because they are the people that actually we need to go and talk to more than actual security professionals who kind of already know what we're going to tell them. I think security, through its own fault, largely, has some making up to do, because security have been known in the past, of course, as the no people. You can't do this, you can't do this, and they haven't been helpful. So a lot of parts of IT don't want to talk to security because they're like, nah, you're not helpful. You just say no, you don't help me. And I think there is an acceptance in security that we shouldn't be like that, but because so many people have historically been burnt by that attitude, that people still see security as very unapproachable, and they don't want to come and talk to us. And so it hasn't been super collaborative. I think we're getting there, but slowly. So we still got a ways to go.
What is working for Microsoft to grow their services and their products very fast? Because Azure is growing very fast in last few years. What you people are doing? What magic is happening?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's any magic. There's so many bits. Microsoft Employees is a very big tech vendor, as you know. There's a lot of people working really hard on all the products. They do. I think for me, the biggest change. Now, I haven't been with Microsoft long enough to see the whole life cycle of this, but I have many colleagues who have. You may remember that historically, Microsoft used to not play nice with any other vendors. We wouldn't have our things wouldn't talk to other vendors. We didn't use open standards. We used to use everything proprietary. So it was very hard to get Microsoft to work with other things. So you basically had to be all Microsoft or nothing. Whereas nowadays, I think Microsoft has very much changed its attitude in the last sort of 5, 6, well, probably even longer, sort of 7, 8 years. And now Microsoft's like, hey, actually, we don't think you're going to be all Microsoft realistically. Let's use these open standards that the rest of the industry uses. Let's do this. And I think, Microsoft's put the effort into, research and development in the areas of tech that have been relevant as well, like security, like AI, etc. So, I think they've always kept, they've really had their eye on the ball with what's coming and what will be, the next big things. So, yeah, I think and then there's a lot of really smart people working really hard as well. And that's on the products in the background, on, keeping everything running. And then all the people who go out and spread the good Microsoft word. So yeah, there's loads of things. I think I don't think I could pin it down to any one thing. Our CEO is very cool, Satya Nadella, and when he joined Microsoft, I can't remember what year it was. It was a little while ago now. 2014 maybe, I think. I mean, he has a very different, he encouraged people to have a growth mindset and to kind of think outside the box. And I think sort of that trickle down to the whole organization, you can see in, what Microsoft does now.
And what is working for you in order to be great in communicating with computer and communicating with human beings?
It's a good question. So I think naturally some of us are better at it than others, but I think one of the most important things is when you talk to different people is to make it understandable to whoever you're talking to. So if I start throwing in lots of acronyms, like I start saying CSPM, blah, 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 and talk to my mom, she has no idea what I'm talking about. But if I say to her, there's a tool and what it does is it looks at all your computers, and I know it's more than computers, but my mom doesn't understand that. So, it looks at all the computers and it tells you if they're secure, if you need to fix things. And if you need to fix things, it tells you what you need to fix. That my mom can understand. And one of my major bugbears about security, although we do it in other parts of tech, but as I said, security is my bit of tech. So is that we have been very gatekeepy. And what I mean by that is we tell people, security, I've always enjoyed telling people, this is very complicated. You wouldn't understand because it's security, blah, 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 blah. And we've been doing that for years. And I think, it's partly a job preservation thing, which is silly because we have a security shortage. Like we don't need to preserve our jobs. Like if that's what you think you need to do to preserve your job, you probably aren't very good at your job. But there's probably other reasons, but we've been very gatekeepy. We don't want to talk about security because it's too complicated and we're very special and blah, 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 blah. But in fact, all that's done is hinder us because there will always be a space, and there will always be a space for dedicated security professionals, always. There's no doubt. But by making other parts of tech and the wider world more security aware and security minded, it actually helps uplift the whole thing because security people can't just do it by themselves. But we have been really, really bad at explaining things. But what I find is, if things are explained at the right level, to whoever the audience is, people can understand it. It's security is common sense. Really it is. That is all it is common sense. I mean, of course, there are some very niche bits of security where you need particular type of training, but those high level principles of how we do security are very, very accessible to everybody. And I detest the gatekeepingness that we sometimes put around helping people understand security principles. So yeah, I think that's why there's a space for advocates and good communicators. And I would always say there's a well-known problem. It's got a couple of names. It's not, again, a security specific or even a tech specific problem. It's called the expert problem. And the expert problem, it sort of describes that the more you know about a topic, whatever that topic is, the worse you are at explaining it to other people because you start to assume that people know what you do. So you don't explain things in simple terms, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, it's not a security or tech specific problem. It's just human psychology. So always remembering, am I explaining this in like a simple way that someone's going to understand rather than just assuming knowledge is really, really important.
So working in security, knowing do's and don't do's for a long time and being logical with the machine all the time, how this work experience impacted or affected you personally and you as a person?
I'm probably, well, given a lot of time to my work, but haven't we all? I mean, I find security really interesting generally, like not just in my work, in my paid work, but in my day-to-day life. I went to the hairdressers 2 weeks ago. I ended up talking to my hairdresser about password managers, random things like that, because I think what's fascinating about security to me is that everybody, if you use the internet, which everybody does, and even if you're one of those people who tries to be tries to keep everything off digital, it's not really possible, right? And so all of the security stuff does affect everybody in some way, shape, or form. And that's what I find fascinating. Also, whenever my family get weird emails and they get worried or they clicked on a link, they always call me now and they're like, do I need to worry about this thing? And you're like, nah, you're fine. I get a lot of that as well, but I'm going to say that's the tech person's curse of being a tech person with family. So I mean, I just think it's really fascinating how relevant security is to everybody, because if you have a digital footprint, which everybody does, you are potentially exposed to, some of these things that happen out there.
And the difference between on-premises data security and the cloud data security.
Not as much as you'd think. So again, high level principles, pretty much the same. How you implement them sort of further down changes a bit, because cloud and on-prem are not the same. The main thing that changes, or the main thing that is easier in cloud, is how you architect your security. So what I mean by that is, what we used to do on-prem was we would make, it's analogy that's been used many times before, but we would make like a castle and a moat. So you'd have a big castle wall, and then you'd have a moat around it, and your perimeter would be like really, really enforced. So in a data center on-prem, we would have like loads of firewalls, and everything would go through the firewall, and we'd have this really, really, really strong perimeter. But then as soon as you were in, it was kind of open and you could do whatever. And the same thing with a castle and a moat. If your attackers get through your moat and get through your castle walls, they can just go in and kill everybody. That architecture is not the best way to do things in cloud. And unfortunately, the way, and the good thing is about cloud is that it's much easier to have. I mean, I'm throwing out the buzzwords here, but zero trust architecture. And basically what it means is, in simple terms, zero trust basically means everything is verified, and everything must be explicitly given access to something that it needs access to. So you don't put like loads of things in a subnet that don't need to talk to each other. Everything should be segmented, and the idea, this is very, very simplified version, but essentially the idea is that if you were breached, the idea is it's hard for your attacker to move laterally throughout your environment. So if they breach one machine, they can't just then move around, because there are more security controls in place, be it firewalls, be it network security groups, etc., etc. So I think that's and doing that in cloud, you can theoretically do that on premise, but it is much, much harder to implement, like very difficult. Whereas in the cloud, because of the way cloud is, it's much, much, much easier and definitely recommended. The other main difference is that instead of having that big perimeter that you would have generally defined at the network level in on-premise, in cloud, we can't have that, because most cloud environments are spread out. So you'll have your cloud. You might have more than one cloud, commercial cloud that you use. You might have a bit of on-prem as well. Let's face it, most organizations still do have on-prem. You can't just get rid of it. And you might have some SaaS providers as well, right? There could be, things everywhere. And so you can't contain everything within a firewall, within the network like you used to. So how you do it in a modern perimeter is use identity. Identity is your perimeter nowadays. So you have one centralized identity identity that that everything comes back into your identity, and that is your perimeter. That is a big change that still quite a few organizations are struggling to get their head around, that they just want the network perimeter, but you can't do that when you're using more than just an on-premise data center. It doesn't work anymore. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have some network security controls. Don't take that away from what I'm saying, but it can't be the primary way of securing your perimeter anymore. So they're kind of the main differences. It's interesting, but on-prem isn't going away. So we always have to not forget about it as well, because what we do see is, as I was saying, attackers always look for the easiest way in. So if you basically put all your resources into building a nice new shiny cloud that's really secure, but it's linked to your on-premise, which you're not looking at anymore, they will go in through your on-premise, or other way around. They might go in through your cloud if you're not paying attention to that and go into your on-premise. They always look for the easiest path in. So what's really important is that we don't forget about either of them and try and keep them both as secure as we possibly can.
So how you personally understood how to protect anything as a security provider, and the problems that you have faced, those finding solutions for those problems made you to be a good problem solver and be a good protector?
Yeah, as I was saying before, the main thing in security is the thing to always remember is it's never 100%. Like, we can't guarantee something won't be breached. It's not possible. So then we need to be pragmatic as well, because, all in real life, organizations are limited by the number of people they have, the amount of money they have, and things like that. And so you can't just go in and be like, I think you need to do all of this right now, because that's not really how real life works. As much as we would love it to be, go and turn on all the things. And also, we also have to remember we have technical controls, and then we have people controls as well, and people and processes. Those things they also feed into security. So I guess I think that the most important thing, we're always problem solving in security. I wouldn't say we solve the problem. What we do is we look to reduce risk, and we look to reduce risk. We look to reduce the likelihood of something happening. And if something does happen, we want to reduce or make the impact as low as possible. They're the two things we always strive for in security. And nowadays in security, we didn't used to say this. We always say assume breach. Assume you are going to be breached, even if you haven't, and assume you probably have been breached, even if you don't realize it. Even if you didn't realize it and nothing bad happened, someone has probably broken into your system at some point, and assume someone will do it again. But how do we make it harder, and how do we protect the most and how do we make it very hard for a potential attacker to get to like the most critical business things? They're the decisions we have to make, which I think is why we need some quite business savvy security people. Because I always say this, the technology is quite straightforward, is relatively straightforward. Like, we have technology, we can implement it. As long as it's implemented in a good way, it does what it's supposed to do. What's difficult is you can have all the technology in the world, and then someone writes their password on a Post-it note and puts it under their keyboard, or clicks on a dodgy link, and it's game over. So there's always this. I think the most important thing for a security person is to understand the businesses, the organization's priorities, and then work out, which you can only do with a dialogue, because we don't know as external people, what's your priority? What do we need to protect? Because as I was saying earlier, security is a function of an organization. It's not just this thing that needs to be done by itself. So we have to balance it all. And I don't have an answer, because different businesses will tell you different things. Some businesses might say, oh yeah, I don't care about that. Whatever. If it gets hacked, we don't care. They probably won't say we don't care, but they're like, oh, that's not so important. We'd rather fix this system. Things like that. You don't always get the same answers. Security is always shades of gray. So it's really interesting. And Sometimes I wouldn't even say we problem solve, because ultimately, as an external security person, I don't take any responsibility for that organization. What I can do is I can present options and explain the consequences of the options, and that let someone who knows the business better than me make the call on what works right for the organization. So it's very collaborative, but we're often not very good at doing that. So that's when it breaks down, and there can be mismatches in what people are expecting and what they get. So, it's definitely an area that we can always improve on.
So in past few years, the virtual world is playing a major role, especially in pandemic. A lot of internet users or software users, the number has increased. Is this because of the trust that they have on experts like you who are protecting them, or who are protecting their data, or who believes that you are going to take care of everything that their things?
I'd love to think that was the case, and I'm sure it is for at least some of the people. But I would say as well, there is, at an enterprise level, so a big organization, I absolutely think, they take on tools and new things and they will assess, they have the maturity to be like, okay, do we trust this company? Are they going to handle our data? Blah, blah. But I think for your everyday person on the street, they just want to use the thing. They don't really care. And that's why we have debates about, there are certain companies in certain parts of the world who collect a lot of user data, and people aren't sure what's being done with it, but people still want to use that product because everybody else is using it. So I think at an enterprise level, definitely people think about, is this safe? I think as an individual level, as an individual and day-to-day user, I don't think people think about it very much at all. I think they just see a well-known brand that all their friends are using or something like that, and they will just use it with not too much thought to the consequences. So I think there's two very, very big extremes there, to be honest with you.
Azure came after AWS Cloud,
Mm-hmm.
but the number is growing very fast. The users of Azure are like increasing very fast, and also I'm a cloud DevOps engineer. I do work with AWS Cloud, also Azure Cloud, but I don't see any difference. Azure has the same functionalities or same features or the same services that Amazon Web Services has, but what Microsoft is doing in order to grow rapidly fast because of the experience that they have in technology from long time.
Yeah, well, actually, so it's funny you should say that. So before I worked for Microsoft, I used to work for an AWS partner. So I have also worked on AWS. And you're right that, the base features, I would say, are largely the same. There's the AWS version of something, and there's a Microsoft version of something, and there's nuances, but, cloud is cloud to a certain extent. However, the main difference I've seen between AWS and Microsoft is that AWS is more partner dependent, as in they will sort of say, oh, we don't make that tool. You need to go, procure one of our third party partners tools. And AWS is great if you know cloud really well already. And it doesn't provide as much learning and guidance. I would say it's not as user friendly to someone who's not experienced. Whereas I think Azure, just the way the GUI is built, and obviously Microsoft has got heaps and heaps of documentation and learning, etc. I think that if you're coming from scratch and you've never touched cloud before, I think Azure is easier to learn. That would be that's what I believe is kind of the difference between them. And then, of course, then Microsoft, then that's with the cloud anyway. And then, of course, you've got all the other things that Microsoft does that AWS has not moved into. Of course, Microsoft doesn't have a big e-commerce thing. So, that's just different companies, because we've got, Office 365, Microsoft 365 and all of those things as well that we run. So I think, like I said, my main thing is the difference between AWS and Microsoft is that ease of picking up. I think it's much easier to pick up Azure. But they're all cloud. Like I said, I just want to secure all the things. I think, any organization has to go and benchmark and decide what works for them, in terms of the features, the product, and how they like the company they're dealing with. I mean, that's the same for anything. So, but yeah, like I said, obviously Azure's good. Thumbs up for Azure.
So Microsoft has data centers under the water, and it shows it shows the confidence of Microsoft. I think experts like you, security experts like you, are working really good. They are very confident that they can able to put data center under the water and can able to connect the world and give the data transfer and communication system for human beings and help their work with the technology. So what is happening in order to do some impossible things?
I mean, look, even I'm not privy to all of those things. You probably know just as much as me, but I know that Microsoft spends a lot of time and research, looking for new sustainable ways to Microsoft's really good at that sustainability piece, looking at how we can increase cloud computing, but not just burn up loads and loads of power and use loads of power for cooling, which is why we're investigating using the data centers under the water and things like that. So, I mean, who knows what else is coming? You'll probably hear at the same time as me. But we do invest a lot of money into trying to make things, carbon neutral and sustainable, because that's the right thing to do. The slogan that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, says a lot is, we want to empower every person on the planet, to do more. I think Microsoft is really good at living its values. So yeah, who knows what we'll come up with next, in terms of the exciting, interesting things we do. But, I'm sure there'll be something. But yeah, I think, Microsoft encourages people to think sort of out of the box and differently. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of putting a data center under the water, but someone did, and so they say, go and think about it, have a growth mindset, do whatever it is, go and find a novel way to fix a problem, because just because it's the right thing to do.
One last question.
Sure.
Microsoft Azure or Microsoft products or services have been used even in the satellites, in the space as well. People are able to use their services and able to solve their problems. Human beings can able to solve their problems in putting it in satellites as well. My question to you is, as a person who is working in Microsoft, do you have any idea that when Microsoft is going to put data center in other parts of the solar system?
I don't know. I still think we're kind of focusing on stuff on Earth at the moment. We've still got there's quite a few spots in the world. We had the first data centers in Africa, but we've just got them in South Africa. Who knows? That might be expanding. I think we've got a couple of spots in the world we'll probably do first. But who knows? Like I said, Microsoft is always innovating and looking for new things, and I guess the moon is pretty cold, so that might solve the cooling problem. I don't know. Probably your communication problem back to Earth your latency would probably be the big problem there, but who knows? Just sky's the limit. I mean, who knows, 50 years down the track, if you think how far technology has come, even in the time I've been alive, I'm 36. So, even if I think about what technology was like when I was little, it's crazy. So who knows? In another 25 years, 50 years, definitely possible.
And still we need cloud security advocates
we'll
for
still
that.
need security people. Who knows what the attackers will be doing in 25, 50 years? Who knows? They come up with some very crazy, weird and wonderful things to get what they want. And I'm sure that will just continue. So yeah, we'll see. We'll always be fighting the good fight, I'm sure.
And what is your observation about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube, and also
Yeah,
about this conversation?
you talk to a lot of people, man. I'm impressed. Like you just chat to an awful lot of people from an awful, like a big range of tech. I'm impressed. Like good work.
So I interact with different country people who are into different professions, also people who are into who are not into technology. I talk with doctors, police officers, authors, people who are into film industry. I try to understand different perspectives and point of views about technology from everywhere. As a technologist, as a person who is very passionate about technology. So how this experience talking with experts like you who are already in the industry for a long time saw different things happening in the technology related to security, related to infrastructure, related to a lot of different fields in technology. Me absorbing information from you people, trying to interact like this, asking questions, what I'm going to learn and how this experience is going to helpful for me if I work in IT in coming days.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. Yeah, you must have learned a lot by now. You must have learned an awful lot of different perspectives on things.
So how this experience is going to helpful for me?
Oh, you tell me. Look, security, you can't get away from security, my friend. Security, look, it affects everybody. So I think having a discussion about security, even if you don't choose to specialize in it, is important because it's not going away. This isn't a problem that we can fix. Like this is going to be a thing forever. So I think it's important that we raise people's awareness more generally of what's happening in security and how you can best protect yourself and your family and the companies you work for. So I think you can never talk too much about security because yeah, it's not going away. The problems that, whilst there is money to be made and relatively few repercussions due to the international nature of it. The fact is that most people who are scamming and hacking never get caught. It's very rare someone gets caught because it's difficult. Not that we can't trace them, but the jurisdiction thing gets very complicated and it's not worth it for anything apart from the very, very, very severe criminals. Maybe that will change in the future if we find a better way to deal with it. But whilst there is relatively little risk to doing this sort of stuff, we're going to see it, proliferate throughout everything we do. And as we become more digitally dependent, like more of our lives go online and go on computer systems, it just gets worse. So yeah, it is what it is, unfortunately.
I'm trying to create a positive environment and connecting with different country people, being connected, trying to spread the positive energy through my content or through experts like you, so that at least 1 or 2% of the negativity or the people who has that attacking nature or attacking thoughts, at least I will be a small reason for the reduction of the crime that you said.
Yeah. Hey, the thing is though, interestingly, a lot of the very prominent hackers have often been bad hackers gone good. Sometimes they do go good. So, well, they do say, now that I don't think this is necessarily true, but they do say that the very best hackers are usually the ones that have done dodgy things in the past. Many of them turn good and then work for, that has happened multiple times that hackers that were really good at breaking into systems kind of, well, they went good or they were forced to turn good. It sort of depends. But that does happen as well. So people can change as well.
Your words should reach a lot of people, and your words should change at least some part of the world, and it will be a great contribution, and I'll be the reason for that contribution.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I hope that someone is listening and they like don't go make a quick. Ooh,
Yeah, we are connected. So
cool.
Yeah, can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yeah, of course.
And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Can you share your online presence to my audience so that they can learn from you?
Oh yeah, well you can find me on Twitter. I'm at underscore Sarah YO SARAHYO. If you just put in Sarah Young Microsoft Security, I actually come up on loads of things. Make sure you put in Microsoft Security because it's quite a common name. But you can see my LinkedIn. I've done a ton of Microsoft videos because that's the kind of stuff I do for work. Also if you go on YouTube, you can see some of my conference talks about other bits of security. If it's something you're interested in, I also do a podcast called the Azure Security Podcast. You can find it on all the normal places you find podcasts. We do talk specifically about Microsoft security. So, if you're interested in Microsoft security, go have a listen. It is fairly niche, but it's done by me and some other Microsoft colleagues who've been in Microsoft a long time. We know we invite cool people on from Microsoft. So if you're working with Azure, might be worth a listen to.
I'll put your web links in my website as well. People who find my website can see the work that you're doing, can learn from you.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Sarah, for your valuable time.
That's all right. You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.